The bishop installed a hidden camera to find out who was stealing the church offerings, and what he saw was frightening. Bishop Rowan lived under the weight of leadership, the mantle of authority upon his aging shoulders heavy with the responsibility of his congregation. A robust figure, his silver hair and warm yet worried eyes reflected a wise man who has walked through the crucible of life with grace and determination. He was a pillar of strength, yet beneath the surface bubbled a pot of turmoil. Upon the high pulpit of St. Mary's, nestled within the rural outskirts of Yorkshire, Bishop Rowan noticed a worrying trend. The Sunday offerings, once brimming with contributions from the devoted parishioners, had been gradually decreasing. He initially attributed it to the struggling economy, but as weeks turned into months, he grew suspicious. He decided to take matters into his own hands and installed a hidden camera, hoping it would reveal the thief who dared steal from the house of God. Within the hallowed halls of St. Mary's was Father Raoul. The church's young priest was a study in contrasts to the bishop. He was a picture of calm reserve, his face smooth and unlined, untouched by age's cruel hand. However, he bore a haunting look in his eyes, as if every shadow of the cathedral whispered secrets that only he could hear. As Bishop Rowan busied himself with the camera, Father Raoul wrestled with his own demons. Paranoia clouded his thoughts during Sunday Mass, making each hymn sound off-key and each prayer feel hollow. His gaze flitted from one parishioner to another as he led the Mass, scrutinizing every face, every movement. At the podium, he glanced across the sea of worshippers. His gaze lingered on old Mrs. Maguire, her hands folded neatly in her lap, rosary beads wrapped around her fingers. Her eyes were closed, lips moving silently in prayer. Could she be the one, the sweet old lady who baked apple pies for the annual church fair? Next, he spotted Mr. Simmons, the town's gruff butcher, a man more at home among slabs of meat than the sacred scriptures. He stood at the back, his large frame hunched, a constant figure who attended every Sunday. Massachusetts. Father Raoul's eyes narrowed. Was he the culprit, his rough exterior hiding a darker heart? Caught in the vortex of suspicion and doubt, Father Raoul's heart pounded in his chest. His palms were clammy as he held the Holy Bible, his voice wavering as he read the Gospel. The lines blurred before his eyes, the sacred words morphing into a question that consumed his every thought: who among his flock could betray their faith? As the church's grand clock chimed the hour, Bishop Rowan finished installing the camera, a hidden sentinel watching over God's house. The Sunday Mass concluded, leaving Father Raoul drained and the congregation none the wiser of their shepherd's growing suspicion. Bishop Rowan and Father Raoul were men of God, chosen to lead and guide. Yet, under the heavy chandeliers and holy crosses, they were also men consumed by their fears and doubts. The echoes of their faith drowned in the cacophony of suspicions. The journey to uncover the truth was just beginning, and the road was as winding and uncertain as their troubled minds. The day ended with unanswered questions hanging like specters, casting long shadows over St. Mary's. The Sunday Mass was over, but for Bishop Rowan and Father Raoul, a new week of mystery and fear was just beginning. Bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun, St. Mary's was a haven of peace. However, Father Raoul felt far from serene. He was caught in the clutches of doubt, and each passing day served to strangle his faith further. His once steady gaze was now clouded by suspicion, and the face reflected back in the small mirror in his room bore the weight of these tumultuous emotions. Among his flock was Ezekiel, a man whose past was etched deeply into the furrows of his face. He was a parishioner whose past was as troubled as the stormy sea, yet his soul was as calm as the placid waters after a storm. He had found solace in St. Mary's and had been an unwavering pillar of the community. Father Raoul decided to share his gnawing fears with Ezekiel. They met at the small coffee shop near the church, their cups of tea untouched, the tension in the air palpable. The priest took a deep breath, his words tumbling out in a rush. He laid bare his suspicions, his gaze pleading for understanding. Ezekiel sat still, his face a mask of neutrality. Yet, his eyes flickered with something akin to hurt. He had worked hard to rebuild his life, and here was Father Raoul, casting shadows on his efforts. He felt accused without evidence, a verdict passed without trial. The taste of injustice was bitter on his tongue. With a curt nod, Ezekiel rose from the table. He left the priest alone with his untouched cup of tea, his silhouette disappearing into the morning fog. His departure was more than just a physical absence. It marked the beginning of a chasm in the community, a gap that would soon widen into a rift. Rumors, like wildfire, spread quickly. The hushed whispers, the sidelong glances, they all echoed the shattered trust. The congregation was a reflection of its leaders, and Father Raoul's suspicions had cast a shadow over everyone. Doubt started to creep into every corner of St. Mary's, sowing seeds of discord and suspicion among the parishioners. Father Raoul watched Ezekiel's retreating figure, a sinking feeling in his heart. He had unleashed a beast he was unsure he could tame. The storm of suspicion had been stirred, and now it threatened to engulf the peace of St. Mary's. In the quiet corners of the church, the priest found himself doubting his actions. Had he allowed his fear to cloud his judgment? Had he wronged an innocent man? His heart was heavy with regret and fear. The seed of doubt had been planted, and its roots were spreading, threatening to shatter the unity of his flock. As the sun set over St. Mary's, the church, once a symbol of unity and faith, stood bathed in the twilight's gloom. A sanctuary turned battleground, its hallowed grounds now bore the scars of suspicion and mistrust. The tolling bells echoed a warning, a reminder of the tumultuous days to come. Under the weight of his guilt and fear, Father Raoul was left to wonder about the path that lay ahead. He was at the helm of a storm he had unknowingly stirred, left with no choice but to weather it. The truth was still shrouded in mystery, and as the darkness of night descended, so did the weight of his uncertainty. The second chapter in this tale of trust and betrayal had ended, but the story was far from over. The first rays of the sun had barely broken the night's hold when Father Raoul opened his eyes. His heart pounded in his chest, echoing the dread that had taken residence in his heart. His once peaceful home, his sanctuary, was now a fortress holding the precious offerings from his congregation. After the Mass, he had taken the day's offerings and carefully hidden them in a locked drawer in his room. It was a desperate attempt to guard the trust of his people and, in some ways, regain control over the growing storm of suspicion. He hoped that securing the offerings himself would somehow unmask the thief. But he was ill-prepared for the bitter reality that was about to dawn. As he stepped towards the drawer, his hands trembled. A knot formed in his stomach as he unlocked and opened the drawer. The sight that greeted him was like a punch to his gut. The drawer was empty. The offerings were gone. A cold chill ran down his spine, a sickening feeling of helplessness washing over him. He sat down on his bed, his mind reeling. He was the only one who knew where the offerings were, the only one with a key. How could they disappear again? He was now faced with an even more horrifying realization: the thief was closer to him than he had thought. With the loss of the donations, fear gripped the hearts of the parishioners tighter. The trust that had once been the cornerstone of St. Mary's was now on shaky ground. Doubt had replaced faith, suspicion substituted trust, and fear took the place of peace. No one seemed beyond suspicion, everyone a potential thief in the eyes of the other. Father Raoul felt a crushing weight upon his shoulders. The gentle smiles he once received were now replaced with uneasy looks. His sermons, once filled with joy and peace, were now filled with pleas for unity and trust. But even as he spoke, he could see the growing mistrust in the eyes of his flock. He was losing them, losing St. Mary's. He ended the day with a prayer, not for himself, but for his people. For the restoration of their faith, for the return of peace in their hearts, and for an end to the suspicions that had taken root. As he closed his eyes, he hoped for a miracle, for some divine intervention that would pull them out of this darkness. But as the cold night embraced St. Mary's, it felt like a harbinger of darker days. What had started as a simple act of safeguarding had morphed into a nightmare of deceit and distrust. The once united community was now a congregation of individuals, each cocooned in their doubts and fears. As Father Raoul lay in his bed that night, the heavy silence punctuated only by the ticking of the clock, he was gripped by a chilling reality. The thief was not just stealing their money, but their faith, their unity, their peace. The real theft was far more sinister. The stage was set for the next chapter, the questions were asked, but the answers remained elusive. How would Father Raoul restore the faith of his people? Who was the real thief? As the shadow of these mysteries deepened, one thing was clear: the darkness before the dawn was growing deeper. In the hallowed halls of St. Mary's, a palpable tension hung in the air. The once soothing ambience was now tainted by a tide of suspicion. The parishioners, once a close-knit community, had been pulled into a vortex of mistrust. At the heart of the turmoil was Father Raoul, his heart weighed down by his inability to shield his congregation from this distress. His gaze wandered across the faces gathered for the Sunday Mass. There was a time when these faces beamed with faith and fellowship. Now, they reflected the strain of accusation and suspicion. The confessional, once a place for absolution and solace, had turned into a den of accusations. "Father, I saw Mrs. Brown lingering around the collection box during the choir," whispered one. "Father, I think it might be Mr. Peters. He always leaves the service early," suggested another. Each confession added a new suspect to the list, deepening the chasm of distrust within the congregation. Outside the confessional, whispers grew louder, gazes grew sharper, and smiles grew scarce. The parishioners who had once found solace within these hallowed walls now found themselves treading on a battleground of accusations. A simple nod was seen as a secretive agreement, an innocent smile was construed as a sly tactic, and a moment of solitude was deemed suspicious. Silence. Father Raoul's voice echoed in the nave, ringing a halt to the murmurs. His gaze swept across his flock, eyes pleading for reason and unity. "We cannot let this tribulation tear us apart. We are a family, and we must stand together. In suspicion and distrust, we are only feeding the devil's purpose," he preached. His words, however, fell on a congregation consumed by a hurricane of accusations. The tension was mounting, friendships were being tested, and the church's foundation of faith was quivering. Fear had ignited the fuse of suspicion, and the church was at the brink of explosion. In the quiet of his chambers, Father Raoul reflected on the congregation's transformation. The tension that gripped his people was more infectious than any disease, and it was eating away at the very core of their community. His heart ached at the sight of the divided church, his people losing sight of their spiritual purpose, engrossed in the worldly game of blame. As the day folded into the night, Father Raoul found himself grappling with the harsh realities of his predicament. His once peaceful church was now a hotbed of suspicion. His congregation, the people he loved, were being swept away by the tide of accusation. His sanctuary had turned into a battlefield. The echoes of the day's confessions haunted him. His faith, his determination, was tested like never before. As he prayed for strength and guidance, he knew the road to restoration would be steep. The fabric of trust that had once bound them was frayed. Repairing it would require more than just words. As the night darkened, so did the uncertainties. The stakes were higher, the suspicions deeper, and the need for resolution more pressing. St. Mary's was on the brink, a tipping point that would either lead to their destruction or their salvation. In this suspense, the dawn of a new day seemed both a hope and a dread. In the quiet solitude of St. Mary's, Father Raoul found himself at a crossroads. A heavy sigh escaped him as he gazed at the new security camera in his hand. It was a symbol of desperation, an admission of his helplessness. The enormity of the situation lay heavily upon him, and with a heavy heart, he began to install the device in the nave. The task was mechanical, but his mind was a whirlpool of emotions. The church was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of peace and worship. Now, it was reduced to an arena of suspicion and mistrust. He had seen his congregation transform from a beacon of faith and unity to a pit of accusations and doubts. As the priest, he felt responsible. As a human, he felt overwhelmed. As he adjusted the camera lens, he caught sight of the crucifix hanging over the altar. A feeling of tranquility washed over him. The cross, a symbol of sacrifice and redemption, reminded him of his faith and the power of divine intervention. It was in these moments of uncertainty and despair that he needed to rely on his faith the most. Retreating to his quarters, he sank into his chair, tired and disheartened. He watched the live feed from the camera, hoping against hope for a revelation. The church was empty and silent. The only sound was the distant ticking of the clock, marking the passage of time and the mounting pressure of the situation. Days turned into nights, and nights into days, but the camera yielded no clues. Father Raoul felt a growing desperation. The thief remained elusive, and the tension among the parishioners escalated. Yet, in the midst of this turmoil, he found himself clinging onto his faith. He would go to the chapel in the dead of the night, praying fervently for divine guidance. One such night, as he knelt in prayer, the chapel bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight, he felt an overwhelming presence of peace. In his heart, he felt the divine touch, guiding him, reassuring him. His fear subsided, replaced by a newfound conviction. He felt a silent pledge reverberating in his heart, a promise of divine intervention that would set things right. The following Sunday, Father Raoul addressed the congregation with a renewed spirit. "We mustn't lose faith," he preached. His words resonated with his flock, igniting a spark of hope. The atmosphere within the church seemed to soften, the harsh lines of suspicion slightly blurred. The congregation left the service, a little less burdened, a little more hopeful. As the days rolled on, Father Raoul held onto his faith, believing in the promise of divine intervention. The situation remained unchanged, but his perspective had shifted. He was no longer a helpless spectator, but a man driven by faith. A faith that gave him strength, a faith that promised resolution, a faith that would guide him through the storm. The camera continued to roll, the thief remained a mystery, and the accusations persisted. But within the heart of the troubled priest, a leap of faith had ignited a beacon of hope, illuminating the path towards resolution. As the chapter closed, the promise of a divine intervention hung in the air, promising a new dawn, a dawn that would bring the truth to light. Just as the congregation was beginning to feel a renewed sense of hope, a familiar shadow of gloom descended upon St. Mary's. The church was hid again, the offerings and valuables stolen under the cover of night. Father Raoul was awoken from his slumber by the harsh chime of his phone, alerting him to motion detected by the security cameras. His heart pounded in his chest as he hastily pulled up the camera feed on his device. On the small screen, a blurry figure in a hood darted across the nave, their face concealed by the darkness. The figure moved with a quiet grace, their actions filled with a familiarity that was disturbing. After a few short moments, they vanished, leaving the church once again in the silence of the night. Father Raoul watched, his heart sinking with each passing second. The thief had returned, and with them, the feeling of defeat and helplessness. Despite the clear footage, the thief's identity remained a mystery, hidden beneath the shadows and the hood. The surveillance, the precautions, the prayers, all seemed futile in the face of this audacious act. The following morning, the shockwave of the theft reverberated through the congregation. Murmurs of fear and suspicion echoed through the pews, bouncing off the high vaulted ceilings and the stained glass windows. The whispers were low but incessant, and Father Raoul could see the familiar pattern of distrust and fear return, threatening to shatter the newfound peace. As the week rolled on, Father Raoul found himself grappling with his faith. He questioned the divine intervention he so firmly believed in. The mystery of the thief weighed heavily on his conscience. He retreated into solitude, wrestling with his thoughts, fighting off his doubts. Yet, despite the raging storm within him, he clung to his faith, his belief that justice would prevail. During Sunday's sermon, he addressed his congregation, his voice echoing through the church, "I know we are challenged, I know we are fearful. But remember, we must keep our faith. For faith will guide us through these troubled times." His words resonated with the parishioners. In his resilience, they found strength. In his faith, they found hope. The chapter closed with a heavy air of anticipation. The parishioners returned home with their heads held a bit higher, their hearts a bit lighter. The mystery of the hooded figure still hung over St. Mary's, casting a long shadow. Yet amidst the uncertainty and suspicion, a seed of hope was taking root, watered by Father Raoul's unwavering faith. The congregation, guided by their priest, was learning to navigate this storm, one prayer at a time. As for the identity of the thief, that was a puzzle yet to be solved, a story yet to unfold. In the dim light of his private chambers, Father Raoul studied the security footage yet again. He had lost count of how many times he had replayed that night, the figure in the hood moving like a phantom through the church. But this time, something caught his eye. A glint on the thief's hand, barely perceptible, but unmistakable once noticed. It was a ring. His ring. The realization hit him like a cold wave. He felt the blood drain from his face as he slowly lifted his hand to the screen, comparing the ring on the thief's hand to the one on his own. A match. A terrifying, impossible match. The events that followed seemed to blur together in a whirl of chaos and confusion. Father Raoul found himself facing Bishop Rowan, confessing the unthinkable. His mind, he explained, was fighting a battle with itself. As he slept, another part of him, an unconscious part, would wake and walk. This part had been the thief all along. Bishop Rowan, his stern face pale and shocked, listened in silence. This was a revelation neither of them had been prepared for. Yet, the evidence was clear, and Father Raoul's confession rang with a painful truth. The following Sunday, Father Raoul stood before his congregation, his heart heavy with remorse. The words caught in his throat as he confessed his unconscious deeds. The church was silent, the air thick with disbelief and shock. The thief they had feared, had prayed to be caught, was standing before them, vulnerable and filled with regret. But instead of outrage or rejection, there was an outpouring of empathy. The congregation responded not with condemnation, but with prayers. Prayers for their priest, for the man who had guided them through their darkest hours, who was now caught in his own storm. There were tears, there were comforting words, there was the strength of a community coming together. Father Raoul felt a swell of gratitude. The confession that could have isolated him had instead pulled him closer to his congregation. He realized the power of truth, the freedom it provided, and the compassion it evoked. As the chapter closed, Father Raoul was surrounded by his congregation, enveloped in their prayers and their love. The atmosphere was heavy with emotion, yet lighter than it had been in weeks. The mystery of the theft had been unveiled, leading to a shocking, but liberating truth. Now, all that remained was healing, understanding, and finding a way forward together. But the question lingered, what impact would this revelation have on Father Raoul and his future at St. Mary's? The answer to that was yet to come, another chapter yet to unfold, another story yet to be told. The weight of Father Raoul's confession lifted, but the aftermath of his revelation lingered in the air of St. Mary's Church. The once divided congregation now stood at a crossroads, unsure of how to move forward. Doubt and skepticism had etched deep lines into their faces, and Father Raoul could feel the weight of their uncertainty pressing upon him. Determined to find redemption, Father Raoul embarked on a personal journey of self-discovery and healing. He delved into the depths of his sleepwalking condition, seeking answers that would not only bring closure but also restore the faith that had been shaken within the community. Days turned into nights as Father Raoul tirelessly researched his affliction, consulting medical experts and delving into the realms of spirituality. It was during one of his late-night study sessions that he stumbled upon an old journal, tucked away in a dusty corner of the church's library. The journal belonged to a former priest, Father Anthony, who had served St. Mary's decades ago. As Father Raoul pored over the faded pages, he discovered a striking similarity between his own experiences and those chronicled by Father Anthony. It seemed that the affliction he suffered from had plagued this holy ground before. With newfound clarity, Father Raoul uncovered a long-forgotten underground chamber beneath the church. It was there that he discovered the stolen items, meticulously hidden away. Each precious possession symbolized a piece of his fragmented self, now reunited through the process of self-discovery and redemption. News of Father Raoul's discovery spread like wildfire through the congregation. Skepticism turned to wonder, doubt to awe. The stolen items served as a tangible representation of Father Raoul's journey, a testament to his commitment to heal, and a beacon of hope for the community. The Sunday Mass following the revelation was unlike any other. The pews were filled with an energy that had been absent for far too long. The familiar hymns seemed to carry a renewed fervor, and the prayers held an unspoken unity. Tears flowed freely as forgiveness was extended, and the community embraced Father Raoul with open arms. In the eyes of the congregation, Father Raoul was not just a flawed man seeking redemption, he was a symbol of the transformative power of prayer, forgiveness, and redemption. His journey had become their journey, and the healing that took place within his soul resonated within each and every member of the community. As the chapter drew to a close, St. Mary's Church stood united, stronger than ever before. The journey of Father Raoul had not only mended the fracture within the congregation but also served as a reminder of the profound impact of love, faith, and forgiveness. It was a story that would be told for generations, a testament to the human capacity for redemption and the resilience of a community bound by shared values. And so, as the final words echoed through the sacred halls of St. Mary's, a sense of peace and harmony settled upon the hearts of all who bore witness. The story of Father Raoul, the stolen offerings, and the power of redemption became etched in their collective memory, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of faith and forgiveness can guide us towards unity and healing. But the story did not end here. In the years that followed, St. Mary's Church became a beacon of hope, inspiring countless others to seek redemption, find solace in prayer, and embrace the transformative power of forgiveness. It was a legacy that would endure, forever woven into the tapestry of their lives, and a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. Did you like this story? Comment below what you think and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.